This is the Mop Up Men podcast. My name is Justin Trinity. Along with me is co-host Kenny Baseball, and joining us tonight is Mop Up Men contributor Zach Hurst. How's everybody doing?
Good. How you doing?
Pleasure. Doing well.
Good
It's
to
a real
hear.
pleasure to be live here with Kenny Baseball. I've been a big fan.
All right. Well, let's get started. We're going to talk first about branding in baseball. Just kind of like right off the bat here, no pun intended. I do think that baseball has a problem with star power. You look at other major sports leagues. When you think of the NFL, you think of Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Pat Mahomes. Like, they have actual stars in their sport. NBA, same thing. LeBron James, Steph Curry. When you think of the NBA, you think of the NFL, you think of certain players that are sort of like the face of the sport. And I think Major League Baseball used to have that in a lot of ways. I think if you asked, a random casual sports fan to name a baseball player, I feel like they probably would name somebody who's retired. Derek Jeter, A-Rod, Ortiz, Ken Griffey Jr. So, today I don't think that baseball really has real stars anymore. And I think that kind of hurts them from a marketing standpoint and kind of getting general interest involved. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that. And, does baseball have a problem? Do they have a problem with stars? And, kind of get your guys' thoughts.
I absolutely think baseball has a marketing and branding problem, and you really nailed it when you made the comparison to other sports leagues. I think something that the NBA has done an amazing job at doing is creating storylines and also building superstars. You go ask random man on the street or woman on the street and say, name an NBA player. One, I'm guessing it's probably a 90% chance that you're going to hear LeBron James mentioned. But there's so many stars in the NBA. I mean, even players that aren't necessarily top caliber or even Hall of Fame basketball players, football's the same way. I mean, I bet the average person on the street probably has more idea who Cam Newton is than Fernando Tatis. And that's frankly a disgrace on baseball's part, because someone like Cam Newton, who's washed up at this point, but probably has more brand power recognition, would probably actually perform better on commercials than putting someone like Mookie Betts on a commercial. I imagine if it's not on an MLB aired program, having someone like Mookie Betts or Max Scherzer, for example, probably people would say, oh, like, is that Jake from State Farm? Like, there's no name recognition in baseball. And I think that's really the downfall of baseball for failing to create superstars and create storylines. I think, Yankees, Red Sox, prime example. I mean, who's the villain? Like, create the rivalry. I'm thinking back to early 2000s baseball, Jason Varitek, Alex Rodriguez. I mean, you tuned in for that because these guys might brawl, David Ortiz. Like, there were so many names. I mean, I think back, and you guys laugh at me when we talk obviously offline about, my baseball knowledge stops in early 2000s. And like, frankly, that's because, like, I mean, again, I was a baseball player. Like, I love the sport. It's my favorite sport. But my interest for the sport has rapidly declined over the years just because baseball has done such a horrible job engaging, like, I'll say, the casual fan. And I think that it really comes down to, like, if you ask me, like, hey, name baseball players, like, first one to come to mind, Alex Rodriguez, Barry Bonds, Ken Griffey Jr., Mark McGwire. I mean, what happened to that in baseball? Have the players gotten worse or harder to market? I don't think that should be the case. I mean, we have social media. I mean, building a brand should be easier than ever. And I feel like baseball has absolutely failed in that.
Yeah, what's really weird is something that with all the players that were named, the cutoff period seems to be the steroid era. So once the steroid era was gone, that's like where the branding kind of stopped, and the players are not like, you don't really hear as much about them. They're not known as much. Like all those guys that we named, like in the early 2000s and through 2010, for example, were all part of the steroid era. And I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it seems like that's the cutoff line right there. And then after that, you have a bunch of guys that are all stars, superstars, but they're not like what they used to be, where just brand recognized throughout. Like, you could just ask people about it and they just know who these guys are. And I don't really know what the solution could be for it. It's kind of just a weird thing, actually, that And yeah, I honestly don't really have many suggestions for what they could do because I'm not really sure where it went wrong necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem is that Mike Trout plays for a team that's not competitive every year, and he's kind of the consensus best player in the sport. I mean, we kind of pointed it out. This wasn't always a problem for baseball. Back in the 1980s, you had big stars like Darryl Strawberry, Dwight Gooden, like a lot of the guys on those great Mets teams, George Brett. Like, I mean, even small market teams had stars that everybody knew who they were. It's really kind of like you said, Kenny, in the last 10 years or so that baseball's really struggled with this. And I'm trying to figure out exactly why. I mean, you can kind of point to individual cases where MLB has tried to build around certain players. Like you can kind of tell who they want to make the face of baseball by who they're putting on their video games every year. Back in the day it was Yasiel Puig. Well, look what happened to him. He kind of flamed out. Miguel Cabrera started to decline in his production. They weren't really able to build around those guys. Look at who was on the cover of the game this year, Fernando Tatis Jr. Like that seems like the guy that they're kind of looking towards. But yeah, like you said, Kenny, it's kind of hard to put your finger on it as far as, well, what did go wrong? You can kind of look at, well, Mike Trout, but you shouldn't just be looking at Mike Trout. Like Zach was saying before, he named 5 or 6 guys who played in the same era that, everybody knew who these guys were.
Yeah. And so what about like guys like Bryce Harper? Like that's somebody that they really tried to push out there in the beginning. And he has been a really good player. He's gotten hurt at times, but I'm not really sure why his branding hasn't really exploded the way that it could have possibly, because he's not like a boring personality, but he does have some energy to him. I don't really know what would cause him to not be the guy like the branding guy that they could use.
And he's played on very major teams, the Nationals, Phillies. Like I feel like both organizations that should be fairly easy to market. It's not like he plays in the middle of nowhere. I actually, in preparation for this, because, I like doing my homework and not just giving hot takes, as you guys may be surprised by hearing that. But I actually looked up the top 10 jersey sales according to MLB.com, and I found this actually really interesting, and I think it may kind of lead to further discussion here. So I'll just name them off in order from 1 to 10. Mookie Betts, Fernando Tatis Jr., number 3, Ronald Acuna Jr., number 4, Javier Baez, number 5, Clayton Kershaw, number 6, Cody Bellinger, number 7, Aaron Judge, number 8, Corey Seager, number 9, Ohtani, number 10, Nolan Arenado. Something that I thought stood out to me, which was crazy, is 4 of the top 10 players are on the Dodgers. And I would say, if I had to point anything out, I would say, again, I'm not saying that they do a great job of it, but I would say the Dodgers are probably the most recognized team. Maybe you guys, and again, I'm speaking from a common fan perspective. I feel like there's more players on the Dodgers that like the average fan might have a chance of knowing than perhaps like, let's say the Phillies. Or, I mean, even the Yankees for that matter, which I would say years past, I mean, everyone knew Derek Jeter, everyone knew A-Rod, even more recently than that. But like, I feel like how many people even know that Garrett Cole is like on the Yankees? I feel like, again, that should be a person everyone knows, but like Clayton Kershaw, who, let's be honest, hasn't been the most relevant pitcher, is still ranked 5 on that list. Why is that? Perhaps it's the market that they're playing in. But perhaps you guys would see that differently. I just thought that was really interesting that 4 of the top 10 are on the Dodgers. Obviously a pretty good organization, but I feel like they're marketed well, and perhaps that has something to do with the Hollywood connection. They're in California. That might help them. But I'm curious what you guys think of that, because I was kind of stunned by seeing the names on there. I was actually shocked that Ohtani was as low as 9, because baseball's made such a like avid attempt to make him the next Babe Ruth. Which I know, Justin, you probably have your feelings on, because it's perhaps a bit premature to say he's better than Babe Ruth, which I've actually heard analysts seriously say. I mean, you talk about hot takes, that's pathetic. But like Tatis being ranked 2, I don't think is a surprise to me, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that, because I feel like he's that personality that baseball really needs to build around. If you're asking me today, Zach, who are you making the face of baseball? If I'm sitting in the marketing offices of the MLB headquarters and you say, Zach, tell me who we need to make the face of baseball, I'm telling you Fernando Tatis out of 100 times because that guy is entertaining. Like, obviously not on the greatest team, obviously, but like he is a extremely talented player, extremely exciting to watch. And like that guy's got swagger, something that I think a lot of players now don't have. Thinking about what made, the steroid era so entertaining was like, this was like watching like, MLB slugfest. I mean, you saw guys coming up to the plate that were obviously juiced out of their minds, but like they got ratings. And I think Tatis obviously not juiced out of his mind, at least to my knowledge, but like, the guy plays with that, I'll say like early 2000s, like swagger, like he would fit in that era. And I feel like, baseball has pretty much evolved into, the home run derby with a jug machine pitching to you at 100 miles per hour. I mean, that's what baseball's evolved into. And I think perhaps that's why, maybe viewership and people being engaged is down. But before I like leap off on that subject, like I'm curious, like what you guys think about that list of jerseys and like if you're would kind of come to the same conclusion I do, or maybe I'm way off.
So I when I hear that there's so many Dodgers on that list, it kind of just makes me think, well, the Dodgers have been in the World Series 3 of the last 5 years. Like they are probably the most recognized team from the casual fan at this point. I still think nationally and even internationally, the Yankees are the most recognized organization. But as far as who's kind of been playing primetime games the last 5 years, it has been the Dodgers. So I think that probably has something to do with it. And it is surprising that Ohtani is 9th. And it's also surprising that Aaron Judge is 6th or 7th. I would have expected him to be in the top 3.
Yeah, same here. And with the Dodgers, I've my point of view on that is they basically took over the role of what the Yankees were doing in the early 2000s and late 90s, where they have a really good core, and then they're the guys acquiring all the top guys on the market almost like year after year. Like they traded for Betts, and then this year they traded for Scherzer and Turner. Like they're doing all the things the Yankees used to do, and they're basically like what the Yankees were in like the early 2000s, like where they already have a good core and then they just keep adding on to it, superstar after superstar. And they're always the favorite to win the World Series now, and they've been that way since like 2017. And that's probably why they're actually why they're recognized the way they are. And also Kershaw. I think one thing with Kershaw is he's on a lot of commercials, like a lot of national commercials, which probably helps out as well. You don't really see too many guys other than like you see Judge on some of them and a few other guys, but for the most part, like you see a lot more NFL players, NBA players on commercials, and that's something that goes a long way in advertising guys as well. And
Have you ever seen a baseball player on a State Farm commercial?
Yeah, it's just like,
I mean, seriously.
Exactly. Yeah, you need more like add a little personality to it almost, like give them a personality. A guy with somebody with swag that I feel like could also be good is like Juan Soto, for example. He's like somebody that has a lot of character and he's real good. And he also won a World Series already, but for whatever reason, he hasn't really been marketed that much like the way that he could have been. Or he can still be. He's only like 21, 22 right now, something like that. But he has a lot of personality and he's a great player. I think he's actually underrated for how good he's been. But it just seems like this new crop of guys, for whatever reason, aren't really like the big. They still just I don't know what it is. They don't really have that it factor right now. Even like Tatis is the closest to it probably, but he doesn't like have that it factor. I think guys like Judge has that it factor. I think, but he needs to win some World Series if he wants to become like that big guy from like what Jeter was, for example. Like, but yeah, not too many guys have that it factor about them.
Here's a question to pose to you guys. Do you think teams want their players to have that larger than life personality? Like, do you think a team would let an A-Rod become an A-Rod, like, or a Jeter become a Jeter? Somebody who like, I mean, they just have that like Hollywood type aura about them, in addition to being a great baseball player. Like, do you think that the Padres or the Nationals would ever let Tatis or let Soto? Because not only are you going to end up paying for what they do on the field, which is pretty incredible, but now you're paying for like their stardom.
That's what I was actually just going to pose as a question is like, do you think that there's actually pressure from organizations telling players, hey, team first, like don't go on TikTok, don't go on Instagram, don't be focused on creating your own brand, team first, we'll market you accordingly. We'll put you on, the MLB like tickets, or like, just we'll market you. Like, please don't do that on your own. Like, that's almost my assumption, because like you can't tell me that the MLB, especially like look at like someone like Javi Baez or like Tatis, for example, Correa. Like, I feel like there's some solid personality as far as like can kind of create that drama, could be entertaining, could probably frankly just make like funny content. But like, thinking about, like, again, I'll just use football for example, because I mean the NBA does it as well, but I like football more and follow that more. But like, look at personalities. One, like Aaron Rodgers is on like every State Farm commercial. So like they're obviously like in the corporate advertising world. Like Baker Mayfield, who is like, I like Baker, but like he's really a very like average quarterback, we'll say, and he's on every commercial. Why can't someone like Tatis or Juan Soto, for example, get on one of those commercials? And I wonder, hey, does MLB like shun that? Like, are they scared of that? But I also think, you look at some of the personalities in football, basketball, they're like on TikTok, like doing like dances before the game. Like, it's not even necessarily sport related, or even like, hey, that guy's on like the Super Bowl winning team. I mean, there's guys with like super like followings on social media in the NFL that play on losing teams every year, but everyone loves them because they're entertaining. Like, they have like a social media personality, and we are living in the age of the social media influencer, like where there are people that make hundreds of millions of dollars making YouTube videos or TikToks or Instagram reels. Like, there's so many, I'll say, branding people out there that do much less than play professional baseball. And I wonder, is the MLB actually telling someone like, Tatis or Baez, people that are, entertaining personalities, hey, we don't want you going out and building your own brand. Your brand sits within the Mets organization or within the Yankees organization. I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps you guys know, just because you follow the sport closer than I do. But like, it blows my mind that baseball doesn't build these superstar personalities, because I think leagues have, with social media, have evolved into being star driven. I think the star player gets the ratings. I don't think even the quality of the game matters as much. Like, people say, oh, the games are too long. If you look historically, games really aren't that much longer than they have been for the last like 20 years. It really comes down to like, is there someone that I'm tuning in to watch? Like, if I tune into an average football game, for example, if I'm not a fan of that team, why would I tune in? Well, I like watching, Odell Beckham Jr. play. He's not even that good anymore, but he still gets ratings. And I wonder, like, why can't the MLB seem to do that? I mean, they obviously, I think, made an attempt with Ohtani, but like, you can't tell me that like there's not other people that frankly I think are more deserving of it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think that you nailed it at the end. It's pretty dumb if they actually told guys not to go out there and try and build up their personality, because that's what sells tickets. And ultimately, like, you're looking to sell as many tickets as possible. So I don't see how that would really help the organization to do that. But I know it is kind of like the time now where they don't want there to be distractions off the field. But like, just if you build your personality through, say, like TikTok or even just commercials or something like that, I don't really think that really is a distraction off the field necessarily. It would more be like the stuff if they get themselves in trouble and do stupid things that's like what would be like the distraction off the field. But I don't see there really a reason why the team should tell them not to do anything. And that it just doesn't make sense if they did that. That would be pretty stupid on the MLB team's part.
Yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the state of baseball as far as actual gameplay. There's been a lot of talk in recent years about the three true outcomes: home runs, strikeouts, walks. It's been said that it's not as exciting, especially when you couple that in with the number of pitching changes that there are, the number of starting pitchers that don't go 5-6 innings. You look at this past postseason and how many guys came out of the bullpen that you've never heard of that are probably really good relief pitchers, but it's like, you're not really watching those matchups anymore. Those classic matchups that you would have had back in the day of, a Verlander versus Wainwright, or, a Clemens Pedro type matchup. And then, like I said, kind of coupling that with the three true outcomes: lack of stolen bases, the shift, and kind of, not really pointing to any one of these things, but kind of all of them making the sport maybe a little bit less enjoyable. What's your guys' take on that?
Yeah, that's definitely a factor now, especially I think especially with the pitching changes, and it's kind of like when I was younger, I used to really get invested in like a starting pitcher staying in the game and like how deep he got in the game, and it was kind of like the whole you followed it for this. You wanted to see how the pitcher got through it. You wanted to kind of follow him through the season, and now it's almost like the league is almost like eliminating the starting pitcher's value in a game. It's kind of like they just get through the lineup twice. It'll be 4 or 5 innings, and there's not really that attachment to the starting pitcher anymore. And then you kind of have a bunch of random relievers coming in, and it kind of is like, all right, well, more mixing and matching. It's just like you can't really get as invested in individual players or individual pitchers. And then with regards to the 3 true outcomes, you don't really have as much traffic on the bases anymore. It's more of like it gets a little, I guess, boring. If you get a lot of strikeouts, and then you get a lot of like walks, and then you have some home runs mixed in, but you don't really have as much traffic as there used to be, just action happening between the pitches or between the batters. It's just like a little bit more stale. And I think that's kind of like a lot of the arguments that there are for the downshift in like entertainment value.
Speaking from a common fan perspective, I completely agree with you. I think the entertainment quality has just absolutely plummeted. And again, I'm sitting here, I don't frankly care about statistics or like what the analytics show. Like, I just want to be entertained. Like, if I tune into a Phillies game, I want to watch an exciting game. Frankly, I don't care who wins or loses. Like, but I want to see like balls hitting the gap, people stealing bases. Frankly, I would like kill for a bunt net here and then. Like, it'd just be great to like actually see like, what I would say is like fundamental baseball. I mean, this is something, and I might stand on my soapbox here for the next half hour, like screaming about this, because this is like what just absolutely grinds my gears with baseball is like, one, they say chicks dig the long ball. Like, frankly, at this point, I'm guessing chicks are starting to dig the bunt because like, frankly, home runs have kind of, in my opinion, lost their excitement because the only hits you see are home runs. Walk, strikeout, home run. Oh, great. Like, that's how we score runs now. It's basically like the home run derby. And like I said earlier, like, it's essentially like you just put the jug machine out there, wind it up to 100, and like pump high fastballs, and let's see if we can hit home runs. Because it's frankly what baseball's evolved into. And like, don't get me started on the shift. Absolutely drives me nuts. See a guy crank one up the middle. Oh, that's where the third baseman's standing. Meanwhile, I'm like, you're a professional athlete. You do batting practice like what? Like probably for a few hours a day, potentially. I would hope so. I mean, that's what you do for a living. How can't you hit the ball on one side of the field where the other team has pretty much said you could literally slap the ball, you could bunt? Let's say left hand, down the third baseline. You're a left-handed hitter. You're getting paid millions of dollars to play the sport, and you're telling me you can't roll over on a ground ball down the third baseline, and that's a hit every single time. Like, I don't understand why people aren't doing that to just completely exploit the shift. But no, I'm going to come up and I'm going to try to rope one through the 3 guys standing between first and second base. Like, it's so irritating to watch. And from a fan perspective, this is actually something that I would propose if anyone's asking my opinion, and frankly, no one is. But if people would like to hear my humble opinion, I think it would be really cool if, similar to football, there's like illegal formations. So you can't just stand wherever you want. There's actual formations. What if baseball explored the idea of saying, hey, there's like zones on the field, and like you can only have a certain amount of people in zones, essentially forcing people. I'm not saying you can't like shift. I mean, obviously we did that in Little League. It was like, oh, lefties up, like step one way. Like, I understand that, but like literally moving people, like the third baseman ends up standing at like second base, like that's just ridiculous. And like, frankly, one, it's annoying because I think there'd be a way to like eliminate it without creating a rule by, like professional athletes learning to hit the ball one side of the field where no one's standing, and you would literally bat 1,000. But like, I know they're not going to do that. So perhaps the MLB could force that, because honestly, as a common fan, it just drives me nuts watching the shift. Frankly, watching walks and strikeouts, it's cool. Again, watching strikeouts, like when it's in the context of like bases are loaded, 2 outs, and he like K's 2 guys in a row. That's cool. But just watching a guy go out and just fan people all the time because literally everyone's up there trying to hit home runs. And then, the highlight the next day is, oh, so-and-so went 3 innings and had 9 strikeouts and allowed 7 runs. And they were all home runs. It's like, that's like the stupidest stat line. And frankly, you see guys, they hit like 30 home runs for the year and have 60 RBIs. And I'm like, and that's like considered good now. What are we evolved into? Is everyone Mark Reynolds? Like, it's absolutely pathetic. I mean, batting averages suck now. Like, if you bat 299, you're like MVP. Oh, it drives me nuts.
No, I could see that for sure.
So Zach, you seem to have some strong feelings about this.
Yeah, this is like literally my passion for baseball is this subject right here. I get heated over this because like the quality of watching baseball as a common fan has just completely evaporated. I know you guys are like avid baseball fans. Like you guys can maybe look by it, but like I've been talked to people that, again, probably more similar to me. And they say, yeah, baseball's boring. Like, it's just not fun to watch. And like, again, because I just want to see baseball be played like it would be played if a bunch of little leaguers were playing it. Like that would honestly make it so much more entertaining. Like I want to see balls in play. I want to see people bunting, hitting runs. Like what made baseball great and entertaining was stuff like that. Like, oh, like a pass ball, like runners move over. Now there's like a sack bunt. Like seeing like the strategy, not just like seeing a guy jog around the bases every once in a while. Like it's lost its luster. Like I love home runs. Like frankly, we loved them when Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire were doing it, but like there were other things happening in the game.
Yeah, no, I think that also the other problem is all that stuff that you mentioned basically happened like all at once. So it's not like one thing was introduced and it's like, and that's a problem in a sport. It was like we had all 3 that happened at once, where it's like the 3 true outcomes, the starting pitchers diminished, and the shift. Like all that stuff happened simultaneously. It seems like past like 2010, for example. So I feel like it's all those 3 things compounded together that make it that much. It gets, like you were saying, like the average fan, it's not as much appeal to them anymore. And I think that mixed with, I think that mixed with like the whole like cell phone, like think about like what people do when they watch TV now or watch sports. They're on their phone basically the whole time, and it's kind of like myself included. Like you sit there and like during breaks you're like texting people or on Twitter or something. And I think a sport like the NFL is perfect for that, because even though there's a lot of action in an NFL game, you have breaks between every play where people can be like writing on Twitter or texting their friends, and you don't miss any of the game. And in baseball, you miss a bunch of pitches throughout the game if you're doing that, and mix that with like what we were talking about. And it's kind of like I think that kind of has an impact on it as well. And I think MLB and NBA are in a similar category for viewership. I know like in the championship, MLB actually ended up doing better than the NBA. So I feel like the NFL is like leagues ahead of both these 2 leagues. And I think that could be a factor in that, is like what I was saying with like people's attention spans on the action.
Yeah, here's something that I've been thinking about. Do you think that baseball, the actual game, is broken? I mean, it's now being run by guys who are Yale graduates with degrees in economics and degrees in, writing algorithms and things like that, where they're like, well, the most efficient way to do X, Y, and Z is to do X, Y, and Z. And it's just boring. Back in the day, it was like teams were run by 2 guys in a bar, making trades on napkins, being like, well, I'll trade you Brett, but you got to give me some bullpen arms. Like, it was run by that. It was like, well, that guy, he's got a great swing. Like, I just think he's going to be good. Like, it was run kind of like that, where it's like, well, he's fast, so he's on the team type thing. Whereas today,
ever go back to that? Like, do you think it's possible to go back?
Well, that's my question. Like, is baseball broken? Now it's like, well, he's fast, but like he gets thrown out, 22% of the time. So we're never going to have him steal a base, because 21% would be worth it to have him run. But 22, I mean, come on, we're giving him outs over here. Like, do you think that has something to do with that baseball isn't run by the eye test anymore? It's not run by, well, we'll try it. Why don't you make them run on that bad leg kind of thing. We'll bunt here or something like that. Like, it's not run by guys like that anymore.
Yeah, and I definitely think that factors into why they're doing everything that they're doing is because of how it almost seems like the whole world has shifted to that thing where it's about computers now. It's not necessarily about the eye test, it's about like what the numbers spit out and efficiency and all that stuff and effectiveness that you find out based on the numbers and looking into it. And it's like, look how inefficient we were over the past 100 years doing this. Let's start streamlining it this way because that's what the numbers are actually showing us. It's kind of like what the whole world has started going to in like every industry, and it's really gotten into sports as well. So it'll be tough to get back to like the eye thing, like you were saying, and that's actually the reason why that I think all this stuff has happened, because those are what the numbers are saying to shift this way, and these are the ways of driving in runs is the three true outcomes, and switching pitchers the third time through, starting pitchers, like those are all factors of that basically.
I think what we need to do is just ban anyone that went to an Ivy League school from having any association with the MLB. I think that's where we start. If you work at like Google or Facebook, again, you have no business. Like, go play in the VR world. You can run the virtual reality baseball league, but like keep baseball entertaining. And frankly, that means these like geeks need to stay far away from it, because that's the problem. I actually do agree that that's the problem. And again, perhaps like, yes, it is probably correct in what they're doing. Like, yes, does the shift work? Well, the numbers tell you that it does. Like, the reason they're doing this stuff isn't that it's not working, but all because it works. Like, you have to remember, what is baseball? Baseball is entertainment. It's no different. Like, I'm going to trade my time to watch baseball the same as I would trade my time to watch a movie or watch a TV show. I watch a TV show to be entertained. I watch a baseball game to be entertained. Frankly, as a common fan, again, I know the baseball nerds would, probably enjoy like, oh yeah, they're shifting because, the data shows that, this is, 1% more effective. But like, the common fan doesn't care about that. They want to be entertained. And like, you're almost taking the entertainment out of it. And it's kind of like what baseball's talking about. Like, if they would do like a robotic strike zone, like, that would again just completely eliminate an entertainment factor. Again, as a common fan, again, we all hate when the bad call happens to our team. But let's be honest, like, seeing some guy get rung up on a pitch that we know is 2 inches outside is entertaining. And seeing him turn around, like chew out the umpire, the manager run out of the dugout and kick dirt on the home plate, like, that's stuff that, like, what was that, Bobby Cox, that was just an absolute lunatic. Like, I mean, yeah, Pinella. Like, I miss that component of baseball, but like now it's like, oh well, let's go to the review. And like all of like, I'll say the emotional just climax of emotion is completely eliminated because, oh well, they're gonna go review it. It's like, can we just like have people be mad that the call was a bad call, but like from an entertainment value and thinking about what gets you talked about on ESPN the next day or Fox Sports, for example, is, oh, blown call. NFL, prime example. I mean, again, they have review, but like, oh, they threw a flag on this play. Like, controversy sells. Like, you don't always have to get it right. Again, we all want the calls to be right. Obviously, if the calls are like horrible all the time, that's bad too. But like, bad calls sell. Like, what are they talking about this morning about, Sunday's football games? They're probably talking a lot about like the controversy, oh, can you believe they threw this flag? Like, that's something that like, again, we're just talking about football because they do an amazing job. And again, they just absolutely, the mainstream sports media, like, football season is sports, is sports media. And how can baseball start capturing some of that market share? It doesn't help that like platforms like ESPN, like, it was in the World Series. And like, again, I don't watch ESPN because it's a bunch of hacks, but like, they don't talk about baseball. Like, the World Series was happening and they don't talk about it. They're talking about like, oh, Ben Simmons doesn't want to play for the 76ers. Who freaking cares? Like, why does anyone care about that? But they're looking at the data, and more people care about Ben Simmons not wanting to play for the Sixers apparently than, talking about the World Series. And to me, that just blows my mind. Now, again, that's not maybe true. Like, obviously MLB Network's in business, so there's enough people that care about baseball, but like, it just blows my mind. I feel like baseball has continued to just slip out of the ether of the broader sports conversation. And I think for the casual fan, that's what drives interest. Like, I think the average fan probably doesn't watch that many games, at least complete games. I think they tune into Sports Center the next day to watch the top 10 plays. And frankly, probably during the World Series, baseball probably wasn't a single top 10 play. It was probably, oh my goodness, James Harden shoots an and 1-3. And it's like, why are they picking that? Well, apparently their numbers show that baseball doesn't drive the ratings, but it just blows my mind. Or frankly, these organizations have just hired people that hate baseball. Perhaps there's a conspiracy that I'm missing, but like, it shocks me. Like, you watch ESPN, I can't name one person on ESPN that talks okay, Jeff Passan, he talks baseball, and like he gets on for like 5 minutes, and literally any question is Shohei Ohtani the next Babe Ruth. It's like, or really, like that's the only thing we talk about. So anyway, I think baseball has done a horrible job branding, and I think part of it is they've made the game less entertaining. They've made it more efficient, less entertaining. You have to remember what industry you're in. You're not in, big data. You're not IBM. You are entertainment. Make it entertaining.
So you think baseball needs more umpires like Angel Hernandez, not less?
Yes, every umpire needs to be Angel Hernandez.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite that bad. I would probably, as a common fan, would probably start getting pretty irritated if that was the case. But I do agree, like, again, the amount of games that he's like absolutely blown, and like what gets media attention? Him. Like, I know who that is. Like, ask me to name any other umpire, probably don't know any. I know him.
Yeah, who was it? That video with Terry Francona, who's like, "Why is it always you, Angel? Like every time, it's always you." And he's looking at with a dumb look on his face, like,
yeah, that guy's a clown.
I love it.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit, kind of talking, more baseball bashing. That's what always sells. Let's talk about getting the younger fans involved in the game. The thing that always drives me crazy, it drove me crazy when I was younger, and it drives me crazy now, is the postseason. After you get past the first round of the playoffs, where you have games starting at all times, kind of during the day, and all the primetime games start at 8:00 at night. I mean, what kids can stay up to watch that? I know I wasn't allowed to stay up to watch games at 8:00 at night. And now that I'm, an adult and I have to work, like, I can't sleep in until 9 a.m. and stay up till 1 a.m. in the morning to watch these postseason games. Like, I watch one inning and then I catch the highlights the next day. But who's staying up to watch these games except for people who live in California?
Yeah, that's terrible that they do that. And like the games, every game I think in the World Series ended past midnight. Like, what kid's going to be able to even stay up past like the first or second inning, like you were saying? It's just stupid timing right there.
Yeah, it's like the MLB, again, the big conversation is, hey, how do we get the next generation interested in our sport? And it's like, George Costanza, sitting in the MLB's office was like, I have a great idea. Let's play the games after everyone goes to bed. Like, just absolutely ridiculous. Like, how do we get more viewers? Well, let's make sure everyone's asleep while our game's being played. Like, that actually really upset me, again, as a fan of baseball, because I actually genuinely wanted to watch the World Series. Like, I watch the World Series every year, but like, again, I'm up super early for like my work. Like, I have other things going on. I literally tried to watch every single game, literally fell asleep in like the fourth inning. And like, I actually made a conscious attempt to stay up. And like, I couldn't do it because like, I can't stay up till 1:00 in the morning. I wake up at like 4:30, 5:00. Like, it was really nice of baseball. Here's what I actually think they were trying to do is, they were like, hey, if we start the games late enough, everyone waking up for their morning commute, they can catch the ninth inning on their way into work. Because that's frankly what they did. Like, there was a better chance that I was going to see the ninth inning than, watching probably the fifth inning, because frankly, the games were starting at like 9 p.m. I mean, I get it. Like, they're obviously trying to be conscious of people in the West Coast, which frankly, like, let's prioritize East Coast. Like, we all know East Coast is better anyway, but like, I digress. But like, yeah, I think something, again, with your question, Justin, about how to engage the next generation, frankly, having the biggest games on TV after like, a 10-year-old can watch the game. Like, again, look at the NBA, their games start at 7. Like, even sometimes earlier, like Super Bowl, there's a reason the Super Bowl always starts at like 6:00 or 6:30. Like, it's your biggest games. Like, you need to start them when the most people can watch them. And like, frankly, if baseball started the games, let's just say they start them at 7:00, like, and started at 7:00, like coverage starts at like 6:30, like start it then. Frankly, the people out West that maybe couldn't catch the first inning or two. Like, frankly, like, no one really cares, but like, can people watch the end? Like, that's where all the action is. That's where the stories are made. And frankly, I bet very few people on the East Coast actually stayed up unless you were actually a fan of the teams in it. And frankly, probably didn't have to wake up early for your job. But like, I think for the next generation, they've done a horrible job trying to engage them, because if you make your product unwatchable, how do you expect that next generation to be avid fans? Because the kids probably weren't going to school the next day talking about, hey, did you oh, my mom made me go to bed in the eighth. It's like, well, you have a bad parent, because why were you up till 12:30 on a school night? But like, that's just the reality. And it's upsetting, because I think, again, they're squandering opportunities where I think a lot of people wanted to watch, but like you said, like, you were going to bed in the fourth inning because I can't stay up till 1 o'clock every night.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a correlation between, staying up to watch the postseason, every postseason game, and unemployment. Because like I would end up oversleeping for my job and not being able to go if I was on 3 hours of sleep every night. Like, I mean, the games are on every day. It's not like the NFL where it's like, well, I can stay up one night. Yeah, Thursday night football, like it starts at 8:30, but like, I can, get a little bit less sleep one night a week on Friday. Like in baseball, like it's like Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, like you're going on no sleep.
Yeah, I feel like started at like, especially the big games, World Series, ALCS, NLCS, started at like 6:30, and then even the West Coast will catch the end of the game, because most games, especially postseason, are like 3.5, 4 hours. So the most important thing is that everybody's able to watch the seventh inning and on. So
Yep.
and if you're really into it, you're going to find a way to watch the beginning of the game anyway. So like, just make it so everybody can watch the end of the game, and you'll probably get a lot more viewership around. Like, say you started at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, you by like 8 o'clock, like you'll have like a lot. That'd probably be like the peak of attendance, because it's like when work ends on the West Coast and it's 8 o'clock on the East Coast. Everybody's turning on their TV, so you basically have like from the fifth inning on, you'd probably have a lot of viewership through the rest of the game, and they can watch the most important innings of the whole game.
Well, I think too, like what you're saying with engaging the younger audience, again, like we're saying, hey, like they start the games at like 8:30 because they want people that are working in, California to be able to tune in for the entire game. But like, why is the West Coast the only people that are entitled to watch the entire game? Like, again, I'm just thinking about the NFL, for example, like Sunday. Football starts at 1 o'clock. Like, you think about that, that's like morning time for people in California. Most people in California, let's say they're going to church, like get home, they're probably only tuning in for the second half of the 1 o'clock games Eastern time anyway. But like, then they get to stay up and watch the full, Sunday night game, for example, and perhaps people on the East Coast maybe go to bed in the third quarter. Like, there, you're not going to make everyone happy. We obviously have like time zone differences, so like that's just part of it. But I think when you're talking about young people, that's who you need to market to. Like baseball, especially, like every kid plays baseball at some point in their life. Like not every kid plays football. Like it's kind of like baseball is the sport that kids play. Like every kid plays it for the most part. And like if you can start capturing fans' attention at a young age, and they can start actually watching the game, so then think about like when we played, everyone wanted to have the batting stance of Barry Bonds or Gary Sheffield. Like everyone was trying to mimic people. And again, it's not like I have children that play baseball, so I don't know, but like I can't imagine like people doing batting stances before little league practice is quite as common as it was for us, because like I remember going, it's like, yo, did you watch? And wanted to like hit like the guy who hit the game winning home run. Like I just feel like encapsulating the youth has completely fallen by the wayside. And I think that's probably why we've seen baseball become less popular, because let's be honest, who are the majority of people watching ESPN, Fox Sports? It's probably young people. Like, I mean, the talk shows during the day are on at 1 o'clock. Like, who's actually watching those? Probably kids. Or just people that are home for the day or listening via podcast. But like, I think, again, I just come back to, when you lose that young generation, that you're like developing the future fans of baseball. But like, if they don't get to watch the big game, like, why would they, care about Freddie Freeman?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and it's kind of hard for me to put myself in that situation because I was such like a crazy baseball fan. And like, I know
both of us.
Kenny was like that. I mean, we were crazy. We were following we were talking about this the other day. We were following off-season news at the age of like 9-10 years old. Like I'd be over at Kenny's house and we'd be on the computer waiting 15 minutes for MLB.com to load. Like if it takes like 2 seconds for a website to load, we're like, oh, my Wi-Fi's broken, like back in the day. And, we were talking about, we didn't even have Twitter. We didn't have Twitter back then. We were like going on sketchy websites to like find out like what the baseball rumors were and stuff. Like, so we were like a little bit of a different breed with that, but
yeah. You guys are an anomaly. Like there's not many people in any sport that care about baseball as much as you guys, and you guys know a lot about baseball, but like, common fan perspective, like I'm not following stuff like that. And again, it comes back to like, maybe I would follow, like I follow off-season football news more than baseball, but I think that's probably just because it's more easily available. Like I'll flip on the TV and like have Fox Sports 1 on and they're talking about, like what quarterback should the Jets get? Like, I think it's just more out there. Like probably if baseball, again, marketed and was talked about in the off season, I'd probably follow more of off season just because like it's more readily available. But like, yeah, you guys put me to shame as far as following baseball. Although I will say early 2000s baseball, I do know a fair amount. I mean, I always remind Justin about, the, 2003 World Series when Eric Gagne blew his save record when Hank Blaylock took him deep. Greatest moment in All-Star game history. I mean, again, I thrive in early 2000s baseball. I mean, Ross and Garrett Anderson on the Angels, absolute legends. I mean, that was amazing. I mean,
Giambi homered in that
baseball. What?
I think Giambi also homered in that All-Star game. It was either him or Soriano that homered in that All-Star game.
I think Soriano. I think
Soriano did actually. Yeah.
I think it's funny.
But I just feel like going back on what we were saying when we were kids, I like talking to different people. I feel like there actually weren't that many avid baseball fans even back then. So it's almost like all this stuff is coming home to roost now, where it's like there was already kind of declining, like overall, like the generations weren't following it as much as they used to, maybe in like the 70s, for example, and through the 80s. Because I think that the MLB was noticing that they were having viewership problems leading up to the whole steroid thing. And that's actually what brought the viewership back, especially after the strike in 94. So I think that it was already kind of like especially like after like Bonds and Sosa were kind of done and McGuire, it was probably like getting back to that where like the generations weren't really picking up on it as their favorite sport. That's when the NFL really took over. And it got so much worse after 2010. And for all the reasons that we mentioned before. But yeah, it's kind of like a long time coming thing.
Yeah, I think our parents' generation might have been the last generation that was like everyone was a diehard, baseball fan, or at least most people, because I feel like even our generation, guys our age, baseball is not really the number one sport for people. But you talk to people our parents' generation, they're like, "Did you see Clemens throw the other night? Like he was nasty." It's like no one talks about stuff like that anymore. Nobody's like, "Did you see Verlander? He was filthy." Like no one does that. Like everyone's talking about like what was happening in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, it just seemed like, because I remember me and you when we were younger, we used to go up to people, ask them if they were baseball fans, if they had baseball cards, like all the stuff that like if it was still the main sport that everybody watched, they would all know. Like I'll be like, yeah, I have that. And it was like very rare that we found somebody with like a real baseball card collection or real knowledge in baseball. So it was already like declining at that point. It was
someone that we could fleece who didn't really know what they were, what cards they had.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just a rare thing to come across. And it was something that was always probably prevalent, like when our parents were younger. Everybody was into that stuff.
Yeah, I think even just hanging out with the friends that I have, like come over and like if football's on, again, just comparing the sports, like, oh, like put the Packers game on, like, and probably no one there's actually a Packers fan, but people like want the game on. Like you turn on baseball again with just average people, and it's like, oh, like who's playing, and like, oh, like Harper's up, and like people like it's just not that same like conversation piece around baseball or frankly, someone will be like, put something else, put like this game, like put this NBA game on. I don't really follow baseball. Like I know so many people that have said to me, like, quote, like, oh yeah, I grew up like, playing baseball and following it, but like, I just don't care anymore. And it's like, when did that happen? Like, I don't, like you're saying, Kenny, I don't think we can necessarily pinpoint an exact like time in history where that's happened, but I do believe that the bleeding has been over time. But again, I think the conclusion is we just need to get steroids more prevalent in baseball, because that era was absolutely amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we deserve to have our players on steroids. I mean, it was super entertaining, and I say that tongue in cheek.
Because you had the steroids, you had all the homers, plus you had the Yankees that were like in a dynasty again. And then you had the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry that was back again. Like all those things at once was like, it actually drew a lot of people in. But then I feel like after like, that was like a big peak there. And then it was like, it kind of dwindled down a little bit since then.
So I think we've solved it. Bring steroids back into baseball, and everything they try to get rid of for 30 years. Again. Yeah, make the Yankees the best team in the league. I think we cracked it. That's really what it comes down to. Every team should just fold, and the Yankees should just win automatically.
I actually propose that we should make the Tampa Bay Rays the face of baseball. I just knowing that how committed they are to spending a lot of money in the offseason to acquire talent, I just think is absolutely commendable. I mean, again, Yankees, maybe we make them second, third name in baseball along with the Dodgers, Red Sox, but I really think the Rays show promise. I think we really need to build around the whole Moneyball idea. I mean, people appreciate frugality these days and minimalism. We need to get the hipsters' approval here.
So Zach is trying to make this podcast go for another hour with me just screaming about how much I hate the Tampa Bay Rays and what they do. Time. That'll maybe be for our next show. But just to wrap things up, because we're coming up close on an hour here. Great stuff, guys. I think we hit on we hit on the things that the people wanted to hear about, I think. And that's always the goal for the Mop Up Men.
Being the voice of people. I mean, honestly, this was perhaps one of the biggest highlights of my lifetime, to be live with Kenny Baseball, the Kenny Baseball. This is great.
It should be at either the Mad Hatter, or it should be around some politics conversation.
Yeah, exactly. This was a lot of fun. I hope you guys will have me back some other time, because this was a lot of fun. Although I do bring the educated level of this, we'll say baseball wise, I do drop it down a notch, but perhaps I'm giving a voice to the common man with an IQ of around 85.
All right, good stuff, Kenny Baseball. Thanks for joining us on the podcast, Zach. I'm sure that we'll have you back soon to enlighten everybody with your 85 IQ.
Not make that like a big tagline. That might not go well for me in my personal life.
All right. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We'll talk soon.
Have a good one, fellas.
See you guys.
See ya.